Good morning, everybody. Okay, so we're going to continue on. This book has, I think, 69 chapters. Actually, it had a 70th one, but the publisher thought it was too practical, so they took it out. So in the series, well, we're on chapter 68 today, and then next month we'll do 69, and the month after that we're going to do the deleted chapter. Yeah. And the reason it was deleted, can you imagine this, is because it talks about how to apply compassion to societal problems. And apparently that was just too something. Yeah, radical, right. Yeah, yeah. Protecting the environment makes you a left-wing Marxist, whatever, yeah, too radical. Protecting the environment. Just throw your litter everywhere, pollute the environment. Be natural. So, okay, so we'll do chapter 68 today. Let's take a couple of minutes to settle the mind. Watch your breath for a minute, and then we'll begin. Let's cultivate our motivation. So as our heart begins to open to other sentient beings, and we see that they want happiness and to avoid suffering as much as we do, then that compassion changes us. And it really smooths out a lot of factors in our day-to-day conduct and changes our attitude from looking at other living beings from either a viewpoint of what can I get out of them, how can I use them, or a viewpoint of I better be careful, what are they going to do to me? And instead replace it with a perspective of these are living beings exactly like me. And when they suffer, I want their suffering removed just as I want my own suffering to cease. And so we develop compassion for everybody. So with this kind of attitude, then let's generate the wish to become fully awakened Buddhas so we can benefit other living beings most effectively. And so in that way, let us be changed, let ourselves be changed by compassion. So that's kind of what this chapter is about. Oops. There's a shelf underneath here. that I regularly clunk my knees against. So the name of the chapter is How Compassion Changes Us. And this chapter is a little bit longer than others because in it, what I put is some stories that the inmates, prison inmates that I've worked with, have sent me about compassion. And that really indicates how they've been changed by generating compassion. And so it makes me very happy to be able to share these stories with people because people who are incarcerated, society generally kind of throws them in the rubbish bin and ignores them or deliberately harms them, which doesn't do any good to change them for the better. But in these stories, you can see how those people have changed for the better. Yeah. Not everybody. It depends on somebody's motivation to change and somebody's receptivity. But, what it does is it lets us know that we shouldn't be too quick to judge people and to put them into categories and to say, okay, the whole meaning of their life is the worst thing they ever did. Because would any of us want others to judge us by the worst thing we ever did and think that that's all our life was worth? No, clearly a human life cannot be, demoted to that kind of standard. Okay, so the chapter starts out, this is first my voice. We are the chief beneficiaries when we cultivate compassion. To illustrate this, I was speaking here, would like to share some stories that people who are in prison have shared with me about how their practice of compassion has benefited them. Okay, so the first story is called A Family of Mice. And this was told by one man, his name was Brian. In Texas. I can't remember exactly what he was incarcerated for. He was relatively young, and so I changed the names in all these, okay? So here he's called George. George was a tough guy, a former member of a white supremacy gang. He found a Buddhist book while in prison and began to learn about compassion. In one of his letters, he shared this story. Yeah, so he had been in a white supremacy gang in the prison. And then he wrote me and he said, I'm just too tired of hating people. But, it's very difficult once you're in a prison gang to get out because all the gangs are rival to each other. And if you exit, you're seen as being disloyal and, handicapping your brothers, So he really took a risk getting out. I think he put himself in protective custody in order to do that. Protective custody is you're not living in general population because it's too dangerous, so you live in a more restricted area. Okay, so here's the story he told me. Last night, the sound of a mouse chewing on something woke me up. I had not seen any mice around this cell since I moved here in April, and I assumed it was in the wall where the plumbing was because the mice get in there pretty regularly. This morning, when I woke up, I saw some bits of paper in my locker. One side of the locker has a door, but the other side is open, and that is where I keep all my hygiene articles and stationery. Seeing the mouse had been in my locker, I decided to clean out any mess that she may have made. I started pulling stuff out and putting it on the floor. I got all of the hygiene articles out, and as I grabbed an envelope with legal pads in it, she jumped out and ran straight towards me. the mouse. I was sitting on the floor in front of my locker and had nowhere to go. Even if I did, there wasn't any time because she was pretty quick on her little feet. I squalled like a child. And I'm glad that I was here alone so that no one else saw me. Meanwhile, the mouse rushed past me and ran into the pipe chase where the plumbing is. After my heart rate settled down a bit, I went back to the task at hand. While doing so, I found the paper that she had been chewing all night long. I also found her babies that she was building her nest for. 6 little pink ones. They were so tiny, and I had no idea what to do with them. I kept looking at the door, thinking that she might come back and get them, but she didn't. I thought about just leaving them there, but I didn't want to encourage that type of behavior from her. Finally, I picked them up, very gently, and put them into the pipe chase, one at a time, through a hole by the sink. I put the nest and everything else in there with them. Then I put some chips in there, hoping she would find them and build another nest in there for them. I didn't know what else to do with them. I hope that she finds them and takes care of them. A couple of them were making noise, so hopefully she heard them crying and came to their aid. A few years ago, I would have sent them down the toilet. Today, I worried all afternoon, hoping they were okay. Yeah. Big change for a former gang member. Okay. Now, this guy, what was his name? I can't remember. I'm very bad at names. Anyway, this one's called The Kitchen and the Cat. Steve murdered someone as a teenager and was tried in court as an adult. He has been in prison for nearly 2 decades now. He told me this story about his job working in the prison kitchen. Okay. Today, after the kitchen was cleaned up, I took my breakfast tray outside and ate on the service ramp. Considering that the institution has been on lockdown status with no regular movement for nearly 2 months now, that means that there's no yard time. You can't go outside. You have to just stay put, and they lock down a prison, usually when there's been some violence or some danger of violence. And the guys hate it, with reason. Okay, so we've been locked down for nearly 2 months now. And so the fact that 2 other workers and I were outside at all was a treat that few others were able to enjoy. So they sat outside on the kitchen ramp and ate the breakfast. As an added bonus, we were paid a visit from one of the few stray cats that still roam freely about the institution. Despite the administration's repeated attempts over the years to remove the feline population who wander in and around the prison, others still manage to find their way in and make themselves at home, just like the stray cats show up at the Abbey. How they get here, we have no idea, but I think there must be an ad in the paper that they read. Okay. Some of these cats end up having kittens, which, if found in time, are often adopted by caring staff, or if not, grow up wild among the perimeters of the institution. The latter, while avoiding nearly all human contact, managed to live quite well off the bounty provided in and around the prison dumpsters. This particular stray, a young tabby, had not grown up wild. She was so familiar and comfortable around people that the first time we made her acquaintance was when she took up position next to our kitchen line early one morning and followed us straight into work as though it were the most natural thing for her to do, is to just come into the kitchen and help preparing the meals. Okay, we had only seen her a couple of times since then, and not at all in the last week and a half. There was speculation that she had been scared off by some dog-loving officer who chanced to cross her path. Worse yet, we wondered if she hadn't met an all too common fate on the busy street in front of the prison. Happily, neither misfortune had befallen her. I watched as our little friend slid her way through a chink in the security fence around the front of the kitchen and proceeded to casually make her way to just within 10 feet of us. And for a feral cat, that is really close. She stood there looking at each one of us expectantly, giving out a single meow, and sat down, waiting for what she seemed confident would soon be coming her way, and giving that look of, I'm a stray feral cat, feed me. Okay, so now this is a prison. Now this in prison, something one does well never to forget. Okay. This is prison. Okay. Something one does well never to forget, that it's prison. Okay. It's filled to overflowing with men who have committed some of the foulest deeds imaginable. Yet when I went inside to find something suitable for Her Highness's palate, the guy's eyes lit up just to hear that she was outside. Smiles broke out from ear to ear as a few workers made their way to the cooler, looking for milk, leftover fish, or bits of turkey. Several otherwise hardened criminals headed straight out the door, where their gravelly voices could be heard trying as best they could to purr and meow a welcome to our visitor. I found myself simultaneously amused and touched by the spectacle playing out before me. For several minutes, I just stood there, watching as the defenses dropped away and men serving decades behind 20-foot walls secured by armed towers and raisin wire forgot all about who they were and did their best to pamper the closest thing most of them would ever get to having a pet again. Once more, I was reminded that deep down, even the supposed worst of the worst of us have at least a spark of compassion inside, a spark that, no matter how dim it may sometimes appear, can never entirely be extinguished by mere outward circumstances. Okay, that's the second one. There's another one. This one's called A Teacher I Didn't Expect. So Jerry is a young man in prison for a violent crime he foolishly participated in with the encouragement of his girlfriend. What he did was amazing. We'll leave it. Anyway, he is quick to anger and has been involved in several fights in the prison. An intelligent person who wants to become more compassionate, he told me this story. Okay. So this is Jerry's story. I've been having an interesting time practicing patience with my cellie. Cellie is slang for cellmate. He's a 60-something-year-old man who's been in prison since he was 17. He heard about my reputation for fighting and anger. He heard about my reputation from others, and although nothing had happened, one day he suddenly jumped up and announced that he wasn't afraid of me and wanted to fight. Okay, so he's 60-something. Jerry was, he must have been like early 30s, something like that. Okay, I refused and said to him, "Why should I fight you?" Although he insisted, I declined, and eventually he settled down. This happened several times. As time went on, I saw him worry himself silly about people trying to take advantage of him. So some people, this is their little lens through how they see the world. Could take advantage of me? Okay. I watched him complain about everyone and everything and witnessed his life leave him after 17 years of marriage. Basically, I saw someone who was coming to the end of his life, racked with hatred and loneliness, trying to figure out what his life had meant. I began to feel for him. So when he wanted to talk, I listened. And when he wanted to fight, I laughed. And eventually he would too. I came to have compassion for this person who was in such a state. He taught me patience, not with him, but with myself, because I had to learn to rethink what I thought. Yeah, because before he would have just signed this guy off as a mental case, probably. I learned that I don't have to have an opinion about everything. What? I thought that was a necessity in life. I mean, I have opinions about everything. Yeah. And in school, we're raised to have opinions. Yeah, in kindergarten, what do you like better, apple juice or orange juice? You're supposed to have an opinion. What is your favorite color? Yeah, do you remember being asked these inane, stupid questions? And you're supposed to have an opinion. I mean, it's like the most important thing you think of every day is, what is my favorite color? And what is my favorite fruit? And the huge decision to have apple juice and orange juice when you're 4 or 5 years old, Okay. So what Jerry learned is I don't have to have an opinion about everything, that I don't have to trounce someone just because he challenges me. So just because Sally challenged him, he didn't have to take it up. And that my previous snap judgments got me in a lot of trouble. And his story of how he wound up in prison, you can see that. Okay, I don't care so much about my opinions now. I want to stop the cycle of beating someone up and being beaten up. There are more important things than defending my ego and its turf. All this I learned from a man that people around me call psychotic. Sally. And here's the reflection that comes with the chapter. So by now you've spent a good deal of time reading about, thinking about, and practicing compassion. Yeah, you've done the whole first part of the book, right? Yeah. Consider how this has impacted you. Has actively bringing compassion into your life changed how you view yourself, how you view other people, and how you relate to the world in general? Has it changed your relationship to others? Has compassion affected your sense of meaning in life and what you aspire to? Observe the effects that cultivating compassion has had in your life and allow yourself to enjoy them. Okay, so that was that chapter. And it has some really good examples of how people, even in quite dire situations, can still generate compassion. Yeah. And so that means that nobody is inherently evil. It means that we cannot judge the meaning of anybody's life by the worst thing they did in it. It means that everybody has what we call the Buddha nature. Yeah, the possibility to become fully awakened. So we cannot sign anybody off and say, this life is worthless, this person, should be killed. Yeah. We cannot say that. We cannot say that this person is evil. Yeah. People are not evil. How can you say somebody who has the Buddha potential is evil? You can't. Yeah, somebody has the possibility of becoming fully awakened. Clearly, they are not inherently evil. Yeah. And people make mistakes. Yeah. And among those people who make mistakes are, believe it or not, us. Yeah. So, we're in the crowd along with everybody else. Yeah. And when we make mistakes, when we do terrible things, yeah, we want people to forgive us, to be able to look past that one action and see that we are not always like that. So we want people to have that kind of attitude towards us. Shouldn't we also give them that same respect and have that same attitude towards them? Yeah. So, this chapter shows how they generated compassion, but it's also a call for us to have compassion for people that our society so easily signs off on. So I've done several prison visits, sometimes, usually in medium security, but a couple of times in, complete, what is it, maximum security. And those are the guys who have done the worst of the worst. And before I go in prison, people, when I tell other people that I do prison visits, they say, aren't you afraid? And I say, no. And they're very, very surprised, And why am I not afraid? Well, first of all, it's to the Buddhist groups, and the guys in the group have invited me to come in. Yeah, they have invited. And so why should I be afraid of people who have invited? Yeah. Second of all, I know that they're not going to pull any shenanigans, or harm me physically. Yeah, because they invited me, and also because, they would get in trouble. Of course, when they fight each other, they don't care about getting in trouble. They care more about their reputation and their status. They have to prove themselves. But me, I'm a real toughie. Yeah, remember, see those muscles? Yeah. So I'm not afraid of them, and I treat them like I treat everybody else, which I think is rather astounding for the guys, because prison is an environment where people do not treat each other respectfully. Yeah, and it starts with the prison administration. By and large, you find a few good people working in prisons, but many of them, they take especially the guards, and the people who have power in different departments, they take it out on the inmates, because they are the ones in power. They can make life miserable for somebody else. And it's very interesting how sometimes people who feel powerless have, like to, put put others down. Yeah. And you would think that people who felt powerless would understand other people who are oppressed or powerless. But no, they often try to do a power trip on them. And I say this because I don't think being a prison guard is, I don't, when you ask little kids what they want to grow up and be, I don't hear any of them saying, I want to be a prison guard. Yeah. And I don't think when high school counselors and college counselors talk to the students and say, what do you want to be? I don't think anybody says, I want to be a prison guard. Yeah. Firemen, yes. Yeah. Policemen, at least when I was little, that was a good one. Now it's a bit iffy. Yeah. But, so it's a very rough place. And then plus, the people who are locked up are miserable. They're separated from friends and family, and they're miserable. And again, they often, what the only thing when you're in prison that's important to you is your status and that people respect you. Okay, at least how they're related to by the mass. Most of the guys. Of course, everybody makes friends, in prison. So there are a few people you can talk to, yeah. But in general, there, yeah, people often are not helping each other so much, But this challenge comes up, like you're in line for chow. Chow means food, okay? So you're in your line, and some guy comes and steps in front of you, cutting in place. Now this is one of the sins in prison that if you commit, you're putting your life in danger, or you are directly challenging somebody who you think you can beat up, because that will make you feel good. So it's interesting how people don't always understand what respect means. Yeah. And in a prison environment, and also out here, respect often means people fear you. Yeah. In other words, they do what you want because they're afraid of you. Yeah. That really, when you look at it, that is not what respect is. Yeah, that is just people succumbing because they're afraid. Yeah. Respect is something totally different that people give when they see, your integrity or, your good qualities. They respect you for that. So the guys in prison often are not used to people respecting them, or they can do the fear trip, yeah. But having people fear you is not really initially it looks like you're on top, but if somebody else fears you, and you've antagonized him, and he has a lot of friends, you better look out because they're going to take revenge. So I find when I go in prisons, just to treat the guys there like I would treat anybody else, and it makes a big difference. It's amazing how common courtesy and a nice tone of voice can, can make a big difference to people. Yeah. And so when you see people in this kind of environment, then generating compassion, it's really touching. And I'll tell you a story that many of you have probably heard before, but I love this story, and this story really challenges me. It's a story told by His Holiness Dalai Lama. And there was in around 1990, which was also when Geshe-la came to India, there was a flood of Tibetans coming. China had opened the gates and people could cross. And they all wanted to go and pay homage to His Holiness. So there was one of them who was able to see His Holiness. And he had been, this particular man had been imprisoned for quite a long time. When the Chinese first took over Tibet, they imprisoned a lot of the monks and nuns. And so he had gotten out of prison. He had been able to cross over into India and saw His Holiness. And the Dalai Lama asked him, because he had been tortured while he was in prison, what was your greatest fear when they beat you and tortured you? And this monk said, my greatest fear was losing compassion for the people who were doing this to me. Wow. That was his greatest fear. It wasn't being electrocuted by the prods. It wasn't falling unconscious. It wasn't dying. Yeah. His greatest fear was losing his compassion for these people. So this says something about the power of compassion, doesn't it? And especially the generating compassion in those kind of dire situations where you could so easily fall to hatred. Yeah, but he didn't. Yeah, he cultivated compassion for those people who were torturing him. Okay, so this too, I think if we apply this kind of thing to our life, when people harm us, to have an attitude of compassion towards them. Yeah. Now, people often think that being compassionate means you're weak. They think compassion means, oh, you poor dear, I feel so sorry for you. I'm compassionate. Would you like a piece of chocolate? Can I fix your problem? No, that's maybe people's image of compassion. But from a Buddhist viewpoint, that is not the meaning of compassion. Yeah. Compassion means wanting somebody to be free of suffering, especially the suffering, the unsatisfactory circumstances that involve being in samsara. So from a Buddhist viewpoint, when you want somebody to be relieved of suffering, it's not just the present problem. It's all the problems they're going to face, but because they're in the middle of the biggest problem, which is taking rebirth under the force of afflictions and karma, and thus cycling in samsara, cycling again and again. And this is our biggest problem. So from a Buddhist viewpoint, when you can give temporal help, what somebody needs now, you give it out of compassion. But the biggest thing is thinking long term. what do I say to somebody now, or what do I do for somebody now that will help them in the long term? Yeah. Not just what do I do now so that they'll get off my back, or what do I do now so that they'll like me? Yeah. It's what can I do that would be for the greatest long-term benefit for them? And this sometimes involves putting a cherished relationship in danger. Okay, so people often talk a lot about codependence. There's somebody who has a substance abuse problem. Yeah, Monday morning comes, they're still half drunk, half drugged, and they ask their spouse to call in sick for them at work. Okay, so the spouse, of course, they don't want their, their spouse to lose their job, but also they know that by calling in sick for them, they're just perpetuating and encouraging this kind of behavior. But also they care for that person. They don't want that person to get angry at them. They don't want that person to stop loving them. Yeah. And so they go along with it. And, this is one of the meanings of codependence. Okay. But in the long term, yeah, it could be more beneficial to say, no, I won't call in. Yeah. You got yourself in this situation voluntarily. Nobody coerced you to overdrink, overdrug, and be like this on Monday morning. You created the situation for yourself. Yeah, it is time for you to grow and figure out how to get yourself out of this situation. And the person may turn around and be furious with you. But you're willing to say that because in the long term, it could be the best thing for that person. Now, you might say, but that person got furious and now they won't listen to anything you say and they won't do anything about it. But you planted a seed, you spoke the truth, and that person in their heart of hearts knows it's the truth. And it may take them a while to come around to it, but you planted that seed because you care. Yeah. So, there are times in our life when we, acting compassionately entails doing something that the other person doesn't like. Yeah. But, compassion is wanting living beings to be free of suffering. Yeah. Okay, now I could go on telling many stories. Yeah. That's one of the things about growing old. You hear a lot. Yeah. And you accumulate a lot of good stories to exemplify what you're trying to say. Yeah. But right now, you may have questions or comments, so let's open the floor for that.
See if I can still remember it. How do you know that your compassion is altruistic versus self-serving?
When you are in touch with yourself, when it's self-serving, there's a little tickle in there that goes, you're trying to pull something over on yourself, aren't you? Yeah. So I don't know if other people, I have that little tickle, and it comes in my mind, and it's like, Yes, I'm acting phony baloney. I need to change my motivation. Yeah. And usually if you do go ahead with what you did with thinking, oh yes, this is definitely compassionate, uh, then check how you feel later on about what you did. Yeah, and sometimes again, that little tickle comes up, and as soon as you see yourself rationalizing what you did and explaining to yourself, oh, but I did it out of compassion because otherwise blah blah boo hoo hoo ah. So what I did was really good, really, yes, what I did was good. As soon as you see yourself trying to convince yourself of something, that's like a little thing of, okay, check again what my motivation was. Okay. And, when we find that our motivation is rotten, that doesn't mean we're a rotten person. It means welcome to the club of all of us who, from time to time, have rotten motivations. The club is called samsara, being an ordinary being. And so instead of getting down on yourselves for that, learn from the situation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was kind of making up a nice excuse to prove that to myself, to kind of convince myself this was okay, when inside I knew it was for my own benefit. And this is the key for me anyway, I don't want to be the kind of person who does that. I don't want to continue that behavior, because it affects my own self-respect when I act that way. And I want to have a sense of integrity and be able to respect myself. So, okay, sometimes I do that kind of thing. I need to step back and really be careful, not be overly critical, looking for every single time, to criticize myself. Not like that, but just, I'm going to be more mindful and careful and learn from that experience when I did do something that was self-serving under the pretense of being compassionate. Yeah. And sometimes you find your motivation was half compassion and half self-serving. Yeah. Okay. So then, next time I want to really try and get rid of the self-serving part and make my motivation completely compassionate. So it's, whenever we do something that, is against our own ethical code, instead of criticizing ourselves for it, it's really important to learn from the situation. Yeah, because we have this very interesting, I'm going off on a tangent because this is a big problem, I think, among people. A lot of times we think that the worse I make myself feel for making a mistake, the more I'm atoning for it. So the more guilty I feel, the more I feel like, what an awful person I am. How could anybody like me if they know that I did this? And this is just terrible. Oh, how could I have done that? Self-flagellation, yeah. Okay? We think that purifies the negativity. It doesn't. It just makes us dig a hole and sit in it and feel miserable. Okay? It does absolutely no good. Yeah. Even though many religions teach us that we should feel guilty. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, it's Sunday morning. So some people learning to feel guilty. Yeah. If I can go off on another tangent, I once, some years ago, we were having a discussion group during a Buddhist retreat about guilt, and just, sharing reflections about guilt and how we felt and how it affected our lives. And we began to see that there were some patterns coming up. So we divided into groups. Yeah, the Jews, the Catholics, and everybody else. Yes, we won. Yeah, we had a competition who had more guilt. Yeah, and the Jews won. But the Catholics say they won. Yeah, so, yeah. But now, but the Protestants, they were just kind of, out on the fringe somewhere. But now I think the Baptists have to come into that too. Yeah. I at one retreat, I met somebody who told me they were a recovering Baptist. But, this is what religion often instills in us, and it's totally wrong. Yeah, it doesn't have any kind of worth to feel guilty, to hate yourself. It doesn't it doesn't purify. Yeah. So in Buddhism, we have a practice called the four opponent powers, and we use that to purify negativity. So the first of the four, now I'm way out on a tangent, but it's good. You can never hear this too much. Yeah, so four opponent powers. First one is regret. It is not guilt. Regret and guilt are different. Regret just means, I'm sorry I did that. Yeah, guilt means, what an awful person I am, and making a drama out of it. Yeah, right? Are you good at dramas? Yeah, and you? You good at dramas? Yeah? Okay. My parents used to call me Sarah Bernhardt. So I had to go Google it to find out who she was. But I found out my namesake. Okay, so, so regret, yeah, and then restoring the relationship, yeah, so generating compassion and bodhicitta towards the person we harmed, or if we were disrespectful towards the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, taking refuge in them, okay? Then doing some kind of purification practice, like bowing, making offerings, volunteer work, at a homeless shelter, we have a prison, people who go to prison here, any kind of social service, voluntary work that you do, making Buddhist images, donating for the Buddha Hall. Oh, gee, I slipped that in well, didn't I? Yeah, but anything that creates virtue, okay, that we're putting our heart into something good. And then the last one is making some kind of determination not to do that action again. So some things we can truthfully say, I will never do that again. When it comes to gossip, we may not be able to truthfully say, I will never do that again. So then you say, okay, for the next 3 days, I won't gossip. And then you take out the duct tape. Yeah. But no, I'm joking. But, and then you gain some confidence. 3 days you can manage without gossiping. Then you can say, okay, I'll try it for another 3 days. Yeah. So some kind of intention for the future. Okay, so bringing this back to compassion, it is now time for lunch. So, okay, let's dedicate.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
So I should really say, included in those activities you can do is offering service here, at the Abbey, at any kind of Buddhist organization or Buddhist event. Yeah, anything that we do with a kind heart to, to benefit others, to create merit. Yeah. Okay. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Venerable. So now we can all rise as Venerable Chodron leaves the hall. And now I'll invite Tracy up. She has a message for the group.
Thank you. You can have a seat for a second if you like. I want to talk a little bit about generosity, but as I was listening to the teachings, I was just so moved by how I can come to a place and learn how to be wisely compassionate, how to actually do compassion. I may want to do it, but often it ends up a mess or unwelcomed, or my motivation was mixed, and just how valuable that is to me, how important that is to me to be able to come somewhere and learn that. And also it was becoming apparent that generosity is such a large component of being able to actualize your compassion, whether it's just having an open heart or doing something. But giving is a way to really put your compassion into action. So learning how to do that in a way that doesn't harm anyone and helps the most people is just like such a morsel, So I also thought of people I know that are very generous, and was thinking, how is that experience to them? Because I'm just baby in this area. And I don't know if you can think of some people in your world who are very generous. But some of the qualities I think of are that they have a sense of peace. They have some joy there. And this is one way to get some of that joy and spread it to others. I won't name any names. I'll just stare at a couple people. So it's also such an antidote for kind of close-mindedness, close-heartedness, as Venerable was saying. Generosity could even be just giving chips to a mouse, and how the joy that brought that person was immeasurable. So giving respect. These are things that don't cost anything, but sometimes it's really hard to do, giving kindness, giving love. So the full spectrum of generosity, we can come here and learn about that. And it's an antidote to fear too, I think, because you have to take that step to break through your fear to give to someone else. So I'm going to just encourage you to give, and Venerable gave some examples, including giving to the Buddha Hall. I snuck that in there too. In a way that you find it gives you joy, because, that's the way we open our hearts. other offering service, and it can be in just very small ways. A friend suggested that if you want to give to the Abbey to help repay their kindness and to pay it forward as well, there's the like buttons on YouTube, there's the like buttons on Facebook, and share the teachings with others in the social media world, because it might be something that somebody really needs at that moment. And there it is. They're running, doom scrolling, and they finally see something virtuous, and it helps their minds. So, if you want to give monetary, there's some baskets. There's a donation page. There's just so many ways to do that. And thank you for listening.